And before I start, I want to thank Indian Nuclear Society, particularly, my Guru, Professor Grover, who actually introduced me to one of the first webinars of Indian Nuclear Society. I remember Professor Ramarao asking me what experience I have in nuclear, why should I talk about nuclear? Okay, but I think all that is, I'm very happy to be, sir, recognized as an invited speaker here. Yes, I'm not a nuclear engineer, I'm a mining engineer, but I have wandered into nuclear energy because of my very strong interest in energy and climate policy. So this is, I am from the National Institute of Advanced Studies. For those who do not know, NIAS has actually got a very strong connection with atomic energy. It was actually formed by JRD Tata, who obviously is been one of the main supporters of the atomic energy program in its infancy, and Dr. Raja Ramanna was the first director for many years. So I think we have a very strong connection. So I think from that angle, I think we have sort of, have a stake in the future of atomic energy in this country. So I want to put this whole thing in the context. The context basically we are talking about is climate change. If climate change were not such a global and imminent threat today, I don't think nuclear energy would have got the prominence that it has got. And I'm very happy that basically in COP28, the atomic energy, the nuclear energy community has gathered together and basically made a bold presence at COP28. And I think this was very much required because I have been fighting internally with people in IPCC, because their IPCC reports are all full of, mitigation is possible only by solar plus battery. They don't talk about anything else. So I've been writing against that, and I'm very happy that in this particular COP28, nuclear has actually come center stage. So now this is just some piece of background, as all of, many of you may know, but just puts it in a graphical form. So this is basically the, total cumulative CO2 emissions, right from the start of the Industrial Revolution, that is 1750. As you can see, that is the share of US was very high. The share has come down. Of course, the total cumulative, as emissions have gone up, but the share has actually come down. And now what we see in the recent years is that we see basically China has grown very, very, in a very significant manner, mainly because China is now producing more than 50% of the world's coal, generates more than 50% of the world's thermal power, produces more than 50% of the world's steel, more than 50% of the world's cement, and you can go on. So therefore, obviously their growth is very high. India is actually slowly catching up. So, but we have a long way to go. So if you look at it in terms of numbers, that India is responsible only for 3.3% of the cumulative CO2 emissions till date. And this is the data from Our World in Data, which basically is an impartial institution which is based at Oxford, and therefore I don't think we can say that the Indian government has fixed any figure. It is basically internationally recognized data that is okay, that we are responsible only for 3.3% of the total cumulative CO2 emissions till date. And of course the big emitters are very clear. US is obviously number one. And then you can see now China is actually, from where China was about 30 years back, now you can see that it's growing very fast, and therefore they are now actually have, accumulated 21% of the total CO2 emissions are attributable to China. Despite all this, India has declared its long-term goal to reach net zero. But I really basically, I would say that I, along with some of my colleagues at NIAS, are very much vehemently against this concept of net zero. We feel this concept is meaningless. Why it is meaningless is, if you say net zero by 2050, net zero by 2070, the whole important thing is how much of CO2 you are going to accumulate till then. The issue is the trajectory. The issue is not basically on one date suddenly you will go to net zero. It's not possible. So therefore I think already, Mr. Sharma has made my task very easy. He has already, and Mr. Pathak has made my job easy. More than 80% of the world's energy is coming from fossil fuels. I just wrote a paper on why coal cannot be dismissed from India's sustainable development. That paper was rejected by 2 energy journals, mainly because they said that the only reason they gave for rejecting it is too biased in favor of coal. And both are actually, Elsevier journals. So the whole question basically is, 36% of the world's energy is coming from coal today, but it is one of the most defamed forms of energy. Now the whole question basically is, I think COP28, one of my colleagues is actually a part of the government delegation in COP28. And what we are all fighting basically is that India has a right to development. Indians have earned a right to develop themselves. Indians have earned a right to increase their standard of living, and obviously that requires energy. And we have Professor Grover and his students who have done a very detailed paper in current science, I think very recently this year, which actually proves that basically where we have to be in terms of per capita development to reach the threshold of human development index that we all want to reach. So the whole question basically is, it is not the net zero. We have also got into the net zero bandwagon because there was so much of pressure before Glasgow. The whole question is, what is the trajectory? Now, if you look at what is going to happen, let's look at, we move from the cumulative to annual. The annual picture is slightly different from what we have seen. And what we can see here is how China's annual emissions are one of the highest. Obviously, it is the manufacturing powerhouse of the world. The Europeans have abdicated their manufacturing en masse to China, and therefore what you see is that their growth is very, very high. US has come down, but US has not come down because they have actually lost their energy security. The only thing they have done is switched over from coal to gas. When I was a student in US was producing 1 billion tons of coal. Now they are producing around 500 million tons of coal. But if you convert that coal into energy terms, our production is around 800 million tons. In energy terms, they are not very much behind India. So if you look at it in terms of total fossil fuels, which I have shown in that paper, I said that basically USA is now drawing 77% of its energy from fossil fuels, and therefore you have no right to dictate to the rest of the world what we should do. So now you can see here, India is also growing, and that is basically the reason why the pressure is going to come. In terms of numbers now, what is happening, China 31%. Of course, nobody wants to talk about China. Next week, everybody talks about India because it's a free country. So India is now actually having 7.3% of annual emissions worldwide in 2021. Our share is definitely going to grow, and there is no doubt about it. And I think if anybody has, I'm sure most of you would know that 25 gigawatt of thermal power plant capacity is under construction in India today. And I think on 22nd of November, the power minister has announced that another 55 gigawatt will be started very soon. So therefore, and the reason he quotes is very simple, which we all knew, but this realization has come in now in the government at the highest levels that we can't depend on batteries. Otherwise, the whole thing was solar plus battery. So therefore, what was happening is that, yes, we can actually manage the base load by actually having solar plus battery or wind plus battery or hybrid plus battery. Now I think the realization has come in that after a number of tenders have failed, in the sense the battery tariff was actually, even for 4 hours, was as high as 10 rupees per unit. So therefore, if you talk about 14, 15 rupees per unit, that is solar plus battery, so therefore there is no way that actually you could afford. And of course, the biggest problem I see as a mining engineer is that where are you going to get all these raw materials from? Because today, the batteries are in great demand for electric vehicles, particularly in Europe and US, because the huge incentives that are given to EVs in US really mean that battery electric vehicles are going there. And very problematic issue that what's happening in US is they are trying to build bigger and bigger cars. They are not basically, they want to replicate what they have done in ICE engines, that is SUVs. They are going to build in with batteries which take up much more batteries than what a normal car should. So if you got something like what I would say, I think Mr. Amitabh Kant has given, don't hog the carbon. Now what is actually happening is they are hogging the battery raw materials. That's what is happening. So the pressure is going to come on us. The pressure is going to come on India. And it is already happening in India. That we are actually being identified as one of the people who are basically, there are many other people, but they actually prefer to stay behind the scenes. Somehow people feel, particularly the Europeans feel, that we can actually, we are vulnerable to pressure, and therefore you can pressurize India to basically announce that coal phase out, which basically is it's impossible to do. Now I go with why it's not possible to do away with coal, and under what conditions you can do away with coal. This is the definition, not mine, it is the definition of the IEA, that electric security can be achieved only by having reliable and stable supply of electricity that can meet the demand at all times at an affordable price. I think everybody who has studied basics of electrical engineering knows this. But the point is, somewhere this communication was not there with our policymakers. Somewhere this thing came that if I have a 4-hour battery, if you look at the CEA National Electricity Plan, they're only basically talking about a 4-hour battery storage. And they feel basically that is going to meet all these conditions. Obviously it cannot, and therefore the CEA itself is now backtracking. And obviously they would have informed the minister that we cannot actually depend on batteries, so let us basically go for more coal. But the whole point is, we can't live on coal. Climate change is real. Climate change is a real global threat. And I think public opinion, even in India, is today it's on development, it's on employment. It is going to also be towards basically mitigating climate change. And so that's going to happen. So, but one good thing that has actually happened is that what I would call a long nuclear winter is almost over now. So I'm very happy to see that basically many countries which actually have suffered accidents, including Japan, they now have signed that pledge that they want to basically triple nuclear capacity by 2030. And I think, therefore, the reality of intermittency of solar and wind power, I think the reality is sinking in. And therefore, another very important thing what has happened is that the nuclear industry has contributed a huge amount of, I think they deserve a huge amount of credit, which is not known, for their excellent safety record, for their excellent emissions record. And I think the regulators in other countries also are very, very to be praised, because they have actually released the data, radioactive release data. And I think if you see it, I think it was presented by Mr. Sharma. If you look at the site boundary of 1.6 kilometer, our radioactive, the public exposure is not even 1% of the AERB limit. But the only thing what I fear is public doesn't know. That's the problem. Okay. So this is basically a US DOE report which was released, I think, in November, that they are basically estimating the annual global investment in nuclear energy must rise $100 billion in 2030s. And I think we heard the first talk in the morning also that, yes, we have done this sort of thing in the past, so this is not something that is unthinkable. It can be done, and it has to be done. So one thing that has also happened is that the biggest problem that has been plaguing the nuclear industry is basically the time and cost overruns. I think that is something that all of us in the room will have to accept. There have been exceptions. I think Mr. Pathak illustrated the case of Tarapur. But I think if you look worldwide, except in, say, Korea, China, and Tarapur, I think we have had long delays. And of course, the Georgia power is a classic example of what has actually gone wrong. And therefore, now the mood is more about small modular reactors. And therefore, basically, the US is basically heavily invested into that. So they are licensed one. Nothing has happened on the ground as yet. So studies are still going on. And very good thing that has actually happened is, for the first time in the G20 declaration, we actually see a very specific mention about nuclear, that people will collaborate, that the G20 countries will collaborate in terms of research, innovation, and more importantly, what I would say, development and deployment, because research can be something which can happen after 30 years, and climate change is here. We just don't have 30 years to wait. We have to start now. And I think this collaboration and development and deployment of civil nuclear technologies, including advanced reactors and SMRs, this is a very, very important statement that has come into the G20. I think, and this has got a lot of significance, particularly for India. And the reason I say this basically is that from what I read of many countries which are actually putting up large conventional reactors is they are very short of skilled manpower. And actually Mr. Pathak told us that yes, he is going to recruit 425 engineers. I don't think any other nuclear power company in the world can actually recruit 425 engineers in 1 year. I think the capacity that we have got to recruit people, to train people, and to develop people into competent nuclear engineers is one of our biggest assets. Fortunately, what is happening is, I think our neighbors in UAE are taking advantage of that. So, but that's the way the world is. So the whole thing is that what we have in India is what people call the demographic dividend. And what is the demographic dividend? That we have our average median age is only 28 years compared to 38 years in USA, 42 years in Europe, and 42 years in China. So if we have got such a huge population which is young, which is employable, which is ready to work for far less compensation than what can happen in the developed countries. Therefore, this is a God-given opportunity for us to basically go out there. I think Mr. Pathak alluded to that briefly, but what I would say is that we should actually aim to become the global hub for SMR manufacture. Whether the SMRs are installed in India or not is a secondary part. I think this is a great opportunity using the G20 declaration, using India's strong geopolitical relationships today for India to become the global hub for SMR manufacture. And I just basically draw a very good analogy which all of us are aware, is the COVID vaccine. If you look at the COVID vaccine, what really saved the developing countries in the world was the Covishield vaccine, which was actually mostly made in India. But this was a vaccine that was invented at Oxford, patented by AstraZeneca, made in India. So I think our big skill is taking something and bringing it to production at mass scale, very fast, at very low cost. I think this is what actually, this is the skill that we have developed. We have developed the skill in nuclear also. I think it is high time we come out of the cupboard and say, yes, we are ready to do this. So now this is about the electricity demand. I just mentioned why our emissions are going to grow, and this is why we have to fight a very strong, big battle in COP28, because we have a young population. Our population's per capita electricity is basically now roughly 1/3 of the world average, 1/4 of that of China. So we have a right to grow. We have a right to become developed. Why should we basically be deprived of the right to develop just because we were, colony for so many years? So now, this is the growth that has actually been projected by the Central Electricity Authority. And incidentally, what has happened is the 230 number that is there, we have already crossed 240. We were supposed to be, our peak demand this year was supposed to be 230 gigawatt. We already crossed 240. That is 1 year ahead of schedule. Our peak demand has already reached, which actually means that this growth is not only going to be achieved, it may actually be exceeded. And therefore, what is peak demand? In all India, peak demand in India is around 7 p.m. So therefore, if you want to basically have power at that point of time, which I don't think, most of us, including myself, have seen load shedding. I don't think we want to see load shedding. I don't think Indians will go back to those times when we went to a college hostel. The first thing that we'll go and buy is a kerosene lamp. I don't think those days are going to come back. So we need to basically grow our electricity. But what is the problem? We live in a time of climate change. And this was envisaged earlier, that if you look at the integrated energy policy of 2006, we are at nuclear is less than 3% of India's total electricity. It was anticipated that we should actually go to 12%. And after that, of course, the Indo-US nuclear deal, of course, we have got Professor Grover here who has a ringside view of all that has happened. And these were the plans, that is okay, that you will hike to 63 gigawatt by 2032. We now know that we are only going to reach 1/3 of that. Roughly, we are going to be at 22 or 21 gigawatt, 22.5 is the official figure by 2032. So therefore, we are actually far behind the targets that were actually set by our own planning commission only 16, 17 years back. So one thing good is that this is something that as an institute at NIAS, we have been working behind the scenes. When this low carbon, we have submitted, the government of India has submitted a long-term low carbon development strategy. This was submitted to the UNFCCC during the Sharm el-Sheikh COP27. And what we have actually basically managed to include in that, against a lot of opposition from many people, we have managed to include that, yes, okay, that this will include the growth of nuclear power and including small modular reactors. So we have kept that space, we have earned that right to basically keep it there. Now, I think this has already been mentioned, the CBAM. This is basically something, a very, what I would say, very cunning way of basically punishing India for long years of underdevelopment. To say, because you are dependent on coal, I will tax your exports. And what is the most ridiculous thing in this is that the whole Rio Convention talks about something called common but differentiated responsibilities and national circumstances. And I really am amazed that people who talk about quote-unquote rule of law have completely forgotten the Rio Convention, have completely forgotten the Paris Agreement, where the developed countries have committed, not promised, committed that they will take the lead in reducing emissions and they will actually give technology transfer as well as finance to basically help the developing countries to reduce their emissions. And the Rio Convention has a very beautiful statement. It says, poverty alleviation will continue to be the first and overriding priority of developing countries. Now, having those words in the convention, having signed on to the convention, having signed a Paris Agreement which promised $100 billion, nothing like that is happening. But now they say, no, forget all that. I'll put a tax on you, right? Because I am basically, want to reduce climate change, I'll put a tax on you. I'll use that money to decarbonize, many other things like house heating, etc. So the whole issue is that basically, this is a situation we are in. We are in a situation where our growth is very much dependent on energy. Our trajectory of development is basically, growing. We have very young population which needs jobs, which needs energy, aspirational population. But what are the issues that basically, yes, nuclear power in India is less than 3% of our total electricity. And I think with all the expansion that we do, even to 22.5, which will definitely happen, I fear that basically we will not, we don't have the potential to grow if we don't make some dramatic changes. And the first thing that I want to say, maybe it's, I want to put it out, the Atomic Energy Act. It permits only government companies with 51% equity to set up nuclear power plants. I see this as a challenge to the growth of nuclear power in India. And why? Why is very simple. I think many of you know budgetary constraints. So if you see what has actually happened even now, just before the elections, for 5 years, the free food scheme has been extended to basically practically half of the country's population. So that still shows the huge inequalities that we have in the country. We are all very fortunate to be here, wearing clothes, having excellent food arranged by INS. There's a large mass of population out there that is not there. So therefore, at least we are now well off that we are able to take care of them. So the whole question now, what is happening is, the government is obviously prioritizing national security. The situation in the border in Ladakh is well known to everybody in this room. So I think obviously we are dealing with an adversary which is much, much more powerful than what our traditional adversary is. So therefore there is a lot of commitment. You might have seen in the newspapers, the government is now placing orders for many more, another 80 Tejas, basically another aircraft carrier. So therefore, the government is rightly basically prioritizing national security, poverty alleviation, infrastructure development. So obviously what's happening is, I don't know the figures other than what is there in the parliament question or in the annual reports, but definitely I think the funds for nuclear expansion, yes, we will do 22.5, but 22.5 is not enough. We need to do much, much, much more, even to basically reach the 275 gigawatt. Lot of capital is required, and I think to depend only on government capital and public funds for actually growing to the level required is going to be very difficult. So therefore, one of the things that I would like to propose here is that we cannot achieve electricity security and climate mitigation net zero unless we liberalize the Atomic Energy Act. Of course, there are lots of ifs and buts, a lot of questions can be there, what conditions, etc. I'll deal with some of those questions later. And another thing that has actually come, I think this is very well known to people, that we have got sites which were earmarked for LWRs, imported LWRs that are idle due to three, I think, major issues. One is the CL&D Act, viability, because obviously the cost, I think Mr. Pathak really mentioned that what is the cost at which basically we are able to put up 700 megawatt PSWRs, and obviously when you switch on a light, you want to basically, you look at the tariff, you are not going to look at which plant this power is going to come from, whether it is coming from a European plant or a Russian plant, it's coming from Indian plant, you don't bother. You want tariff to be at as low as possible. So therefore, viability is obviously a very big challenge. Public perception is definitely a challenge at many places. We have overcome that in Kodunkulam after many years of effort. But I think this is still hampering not only the public. I think what I hear from many people in NPCIL and others also, even the state government officials are basically under the impression that nuclear power is not safe. This is sad. These are some of the most well-educated people in the country. But if they themselves are having that apprehension that nuclear power is not safe, and therefore they are not helping nuclear power to grow in India, they are delaying the permissions for setting up the sites, it is sad. So therefore, these are all the issues that actually we are, these are the circumstances that we are actually living. This is the reality. So therefore, what I am actually proposing to say is that we need a recast of several policies and statutes. Now I'll quickly go over 5-6 slides over what are the main recommendations that I have. The next thing what I want to say is, last year we had in November, we had a very big conference which was basically on SMRs. There was a lot of questions, why do we need SMRs in the country? Obviously, basically 700 megawatt is going to provide us the cheapest power. There is no doubt about it. The question is, why do we need SMRs? The need for SMRs is basically very simple. That today, with 74% of our electricity coming from coal, if that has to come down to near zero or some small single-digit number, the amount of nuclear power required is very, very high. And if you go in the presumption that basically the government financial scenario is not going to change overnight, we are not going to become a rich country, we'll say, yes, we are ready to expand everything and we'll provide public funds. Let's assume that is not the reality. Then what we actually need is many more NPCILs in the country. So we don't, one NPCIL actually Mr. Pathak said, it's many companies. What I would actually humbly say, we require maybe 20 NPCILs. Okay, each one of which will be so big. I think that is a scale that needs to happen. So what is the issue? The issue basically is not only organization. Obviously, all of you know, the conventional nuclear power plants have stringent site criteria. Thanks to BRNS, we have actually completed a study of roughly 2-year study on looking at many thermal power plants in India. Practically, we looked at most thermal power plants in the country. And what we are finding basically is to meet the conventional nuclear power plant criteria is almost impossible. And therefore, what happens is, in a densely populated country like India, we are the most populous country in the world, we have 18% of the world's population, and this is continuing to grow, and it will continue to grow. The whole question is that we need to look at is, can we grow nuclear power if we don't change our siting criteria? We cannot. That is what I can say from a 2-year study which we have done, so I can say with confidence it is not possible. So therefore, you need to relax those site criteria. And I think with the tremendous safety record that we have got, with the excellent of NPCIL, with the ultra-low radioactive releases that we have got, and I think, I wish there were more health studies in the vicinity of our plants. I am 100% sure they will prove that the incidence of cancer or any other disease related to radioactive emissions is nothing more than the normal population. I wish those studies are available that would help us to prove the case that nuclear power is safe and actually desirable. So the problems that what we find is, we are not able to find power plants where the reactor center can be 5 kilometers away from active faults. It's not possible. It is not possible to basically have exclusion zone of 1 kilometer. It is not possible to have emergency planning zone beyond the site boundary, that is 1 kilometer. So these are all the things that we have found out during our study. But what we find is, if you are able to, if the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board and DAE are willing to look at this, relook at this, look at the real data, operating data, we have how many hundreds of years of nuclear reactor experience, and BRC has got tremendous data. If you are able to utilize that, I think this can change. So then, the bigger problem, another problem is, another problem basically is capital investment. So even if you look at basically conventional reactors, I'll need 10 more minutes, Mr. Chairman. I'll finish in 10 minutes. Yeah, thank you. So, high gestation periods, high capital investments at one site. As of this time, I feel for the private sector to put up so much money at one particular site is going to become difficult. It may be possible after 15-20 years, but right now I feel that this is a problem, and I think we don't have time to waste. And one thing definitely everybody says, costs are very high. Yes, there is no doubt. You cannot compare the cost of SMR, power from SMR, with the cost of power from conventional plant, because the application is totally different. You can't say Mercedes-Benz will be the same cost as a Maruti 800 or something like that, because the whole thing is a conventional plant is built for base load power to provide power at the lowest cost, whereas SMR is basically there to actually add on to nuclear power capacity in sites which cannot meet the conventional nuclear power plant criteria. So I want to be very clear. It is not either or. It is basically both. That's what we require. So these are all well known. I don't have to go through this. Basically, yes, these advantages are very well known. And of course, what I feel is two things. That yes, FOAK is first of a kind is going to be very costly. The whole issue is who is going to put up the first of a kind. I think that is a challenge actually anywhere in the world in the nuclear power sector. But NOAK, because it's mostly factory manufactured, the cost will come down with scale, particularly because the cost is in materials. If you're able to order, I think the whole logic of fleet mode reactors was basically to reduce the per megawatt cost by actually combining economies of purchasing power. So similar thing will happen here. And I think the most important thing is the moment that reactor is made in India, I think the cost will come down to 50% at whatever stage we are in. I think that much confidence I have in all my fellow Indians that we have the capacity to produce the lowest cost SMRs in the world, the lowest cost reactors in the world. The only thing is that we have to have the ambition to do it. So obviously what I can actually see, the advantage of having private sector is very simple. Advantage of having private sector in any field of endeavor is that the whole narrative changes. What we require for nuclear power in India is not incremental improvement in public perception. We require actually changing the narrative itself. Because it is not only the local population, we discussed about bureaucrats, politicians, policymakers. We need to change basically the narrative completely. It has happened in several states in US, for example, which banned nuclear power. They now reversed their bans, and by huge majority. So we have to change the narrative. And the beauty of basically SMRs that I see it is, from what our study shows, you can obviously minimize the land acquisition, and I think everybody knows how difficult it is to acquire land and how it slows down the growth of nuclear power. You don't need basically a water connection because it's already there. You don't need another grid connection, and these are problems. If you have seen the problems that NPCL faced in Kaiga expansion with people stopping the grid connectivity, grid enhancement. So I think these are all real problems that we all face, nuclear power sector face, and these problems can be resolved. So therefore, but what is actually required is money. The advantage again of private sector is by changing the narrative, you are able to basically garner more funds from multiple sources. A government company has certain advantages, it has certain disadvantages. So therefore, it has got some limitations on where it can go from money, etc. I think the private sector is, I think, definitely more capable of basically mobilizing funds from a wide variety of sources. And all those people now are looking at India not only as an investment destination, they are also willing to basically look at India for green finance. So this we discussed. So I just said, I just give two examples. This is a site which actually in Tamil Nadu, it is a site which is a coastal site. I've been to the site about 1 month back. And this site basically is a coastal site. It was destined for a 2 into 800 megawatt coal-based power plant based on imported coal. This site basically around 1,000 acres has been acquired. And if you see between the sea, the pink and there is another 1,000 acres of land where not a single soul is living. Not a single soul, not a single crop because the water is saline. So you've got 2,000 acres of land available there. Nobody in sight. And therefore, this is a site which I would say would be ideal for a nuclear power plant. The only problem that is there is you've got a fault, which is going across the edge, which I'm showing here. We have verified that direction of that fault in that BRNS project. So definitely what can happen is, there's a wonderful site, but this cannot actually meet the criteria for a conventional plant. So what I feel is, this should be wonderful for a SMR. This is another site. This is an inland site this time. So therefore, this is a site in Madhya Pradesh called Sanjay Gandhi Thermal Power Station. And we have actually, with the help of BRC, the blue lines that you see, blue squares, are SMR modules. And what we see here is a wonderful site in the middle of forest, next to a dam. It meets all the criteria. But one thing which is not shown here is that it is 4.3 kilometers away from a fault. So the whole question again, if it doesn't meet the criteria for a conventional plant. So these are just examples I have given. There are many such examples. So therefore I feel SMRs are not a replacement for conventional plants. SMR are a useful complement in a country like India, which has got a large base of thermal power plants, and it will continue to increase the base of thermal power plants in the country. So what are the sort of policy recommendations? Last 3 slides. One is level playing field. It doesn't exist today. Unfortunately, even in India, in the policymakers, nuclear power is not green power. We still do not have access to green bonds, and RBI has already notified green bonds, does not include nuclear power. Nuclear power, unlike solar and wind, does not enjoy exemption from interstate transmission charges. And this is very, very important if you have got a large plant like Kudunkulam, that when you have got 3, 4, 5, 6 coming, in monsoon, Tamil Nadu will not be able to take that power because of heavy wind generation at that point of time. So you need exemption from this, and I don't see why there should be any denial of NPCL's claim to have exemption from interstate transmission charges. So you should, why Government of India is not declaring nuclear power to be an infrastructure sector? The advantage of declaring it as an infrastructure sector basically is that you are able to get both the domestic and international finance. Because we have identified finance as one of the key issues, and this is the way that we can actually do. Then finally, I think one thing very, very important is, if you have to go from coal to nuclear, the Inflation Reduction Act in US provides a 10% incentive to any nuclear power plant that is put up in a coal site. 10% incentive in tax credits. It's a huge amount of money. So if we have to do the coal to nuclear transition, which we have to, this is the sort of thing that has to happen to basically prompt people to look towards this. So now, why do we need an amendment to the Atomic Energy Act? One of the main issues is that many of these thermal power plants are actually, in fact, 1/3 of the thermal power generation in the country comes from central government plants, primarily NTPC and DVC. 1/3 of the generation comes from state government owned plants. 1/3 comes from private plants. So the whole question basically is, if we want to convert not all, but most of the sites to green, climate friendly nuclear power, so the whole question, the site doesn't belong to the central government. And therefore, even for that point alone, you need an amendment to the Atomic Energy Act so that you are able to put, you can start off, my personal feeling, you can start off with SMRs because that is what is most likely to take off in those sites. But this beginning has to be made, and you can always put a condition that this SMR should be made in India and should not be imported. And I think we are very capable of doing it. So obviously what needs to happen is the role of the regulator has to be strengthened, and I think this is something that is very well recognized. And we already discussed the need to basically amend the siting criteria. Also there is a need for basically indigenous SMRs that in parallel, so that we are able to offer a benchmark. It is not that anybody can sell an SMR at any cost in this country. We need to benchmark with an indigenous SMR, and I'm very happy to see that Nuclear Power Corporation is also ready to go into the business of. And what is going to happen also, that you will need in due course of time micro reactors. These are, today the total captive power generation capacity in the country is approximately 60 gigawatt. 60,000 megawatt is the total capacity of captive power plants in the country. Starting from 1 megawatt to, their captive power plants are more than 1,000 megawatt as well. So therefore, many of these industries will fall under the CBAM, and therefore there is a need for basically smaller reactors, maybe less than 30 megawatt, and I think this is something that basically should be developed. NTPC, I think, is going to enter the atomic power sector. Obviously, they have a JV, which has been mentioned, it's there from 2011. But what I feel again is that let 1,000 flowers bloom, that basically NTPC is a Government of India company. Why can't NTPC enter the nuclear power sector on its own? Of course, under the overarching guidance of Atomic Energy Regulatory Board. And because you have got these issues with a lot of the state government companies that they don't have money to basically put up nuclear power, what can be done is the government can enact a policy to permit NTPC to form joint ventures to do this. And what I would say is, everybody talks about safety. Of course, in nuclear, safety is most important. What I have, my proposal is, for the first 10 years of operation, that NPCIL or a similar government company can be licensed as the sole operator under the Atomic Energy Act. So this takes care of this problem, that during the handholding period, you have got a DAE control company which is actually managing the show. And therefore, it stands to reason that today that you have got CISF which is managing security, same thing should continue. So what we need is obviously uranium, the most important thing. And I think this is where that a lot of work needs to be done. How do you basically set up national uranium storage? We already have, but this has to be expanded manifold. And very, very important is, because we believe in a closed cycle, we should put up actually reprocessing facilities for imported uranium fuel under international safeguards. We don't have it till now. The great thing, thanks to people like Dr. Kakodkar and Professor Grover, we have got the right under the 123 agreement to put up reprocessing facilities. I think we need to do that now so that we are able to basically recycle that, we are able to use that for further parts of the nuclear fuel cycle. And very, very important is the CLND Act. Last. The CLND Act needs to be harmonized with the Convention for Supplementary Compensation. As one particular clause with which everybody is aware, 17B. Basically what we have seen is the CLND rules try to define basically liability in different ways, try to define supplier in different ways. There are explanations given in the FAQs, obviously because the Act has created confusion. So DIE in all its good faith has tried to basically address many of the queries of suppliers. But what basically I think everybody is important is, Act is supreme because that is legislative parliament. And I think everybody is afraid that if the Act is supreme, then the definitions of the Act will hold good. And we have got a system called public interest litigation in the country, and therefore something else may happen. So therefore, there is a need to harmonize. And definitely what I feel, we have got a limitation of liability in the rules of 1,500 crores. I am definitely sure that once our capacity increases, we can actually increase this liability as well. So I think I will stop here, and any questions I'm happy to answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Srikanth.